a little bit of background was that I came from a poor family in New England, rural New England. I grew up always knowing that I was going to go to college someday, and that college was like my way out of poverty, I thought, except for the joke was on me because I graduated like right around the time where like the economy was really going to hell in 2007. So it was around that time that like I thought that I would graduate, and I thought that if I'd just done that right, then I would like be guaranteed good money for like the rest of like my life, basically. I wasn't like smart enough to realize that that's probably not true, but I held fast to the fact that if I just worked hard enough, I could live without being poor. Like, I grew up poor, and there's nothing wrong with that, but I didn't enjoy it because there's just so much struggle that comes with not being able to afford your basic stuff or extra stuff, and the amount of options that you have when you're poor are very limited, and the amount of like happiness in your life and enjoyment is just kind of limited. And so I really always wanted to change that, and so education for me was a way to do like kind of like hack the system. So I got like basically straight A's when I was in high school so that I could get grants, so that I could afford the best school that I could go to, and that was the state university. It was basically a public Ivy, but it was a state university, and I only applied to a couple of schools. And I went there. It was like a big shock for me because all these people from like bigger places had their tuition paid by their family to go, and I was kind of like, not the charity case, but like I earned my way in, and it was kind of like an in-state tuition type deal versus like, it was a little bit fancy to go to the school that I went to, and to say you were not slumming it in New England in this little tiny area, but like it was kind of fancy and kind of like nice for the people that came from like the bigger cities like New York City and like Boston, and like it was kind of like, oh, you're going up there for a little while. So it was kind of like me mixed in with all these people that I thought I wanted to be like, but kind of not. I was learning that I was not like them because not that they didn't earn their way into the college the same way that I did, but like we had very different backgrounds, and it just became very apparent that the struggles even that I had, you know, getting some textbooks were a little bit different than the struggles that, you know, they faced while being in college. I graduated college with a degree in art. It wasn't in a science. And at the time it was very like, people graduated with that degree, like a lot. There was a lot of people. It wasn't like I had a very specific degree with a very specific skill. I had a very generalized degree, and if you wanted to do much with it, you had to go to more school and get more debt, and, you know, prevent yourself from becoming an adult for a little bit longer by staying in college. And I think that people who didn't really figure out what they were going to do, but like knew that their earnings were not going to match what they were going to do anyways, they would just continue school and just get in more debt because that was the acceptable thing for society. Like, it was not frowned upon to do that. It was just like, okay, well, you don't know what you want, go get some more school. And it was just okay to accumulate debt after debt after debt. So I graduated with like $22,000 worth of debt, which was pretty good for all 4 years. And but that was a real hindrance in like my life because I wasn't rich to begin with. I graduated, and it was very hard for me to find a job, and I was in a long-term relationship at this point, and the person I was in a long-term relationship with found an alternative path to entering the job market, and so I felt like I was the only one kind of failing at life. Here I was thinking that all of my problems were going to be solved just because I had this degree, but I didn't really think about the idea behind this degree. Like, I didn't have a job that would put me, I didn't have a skill that would put me way above the market. Like, there was plenty of people who had the same degree from the same college that were trying to get the same types of jobs in this very small job pool in the town in which I went to college and I lived. So for a long time, I was a very rural like girl who went to college. I was the first person in my family to go to college, to graduate. And that was kind of like a big deal, but the world doesn't care that that's a big deal. The world is just like, well, you know, that's great. And that, you know, you have some debt, you got some skills, you have a piece of paper that says you went to college. But like, that's great. So do everybody else, basically, because they were just giving out college degrees during my time that I went to college. It became a little bit worse after, but basically that was my experience. I thought I was going to be special, but I was not. And it was very quick to be a parent for that, because I was the first person in my family to kind of navigate this. Like, everybody else just worked hard and kind of like dealt with being not rich. I'm not trying to be rich, but you know what I mean. They just dealt with their hardships of life and just kind of like, you know, well, if I have to work like 80 hours for like basically zero pay and, you know, not really do anything too fun, that's just my lot in life. And it's, you know, just work hard, do your best, and just be happy with what you have. And for me, I don't know why I couldn't swallow that. Like, I didn't know why that wasn't just a good solution for me. But for me, it was like that. It was like, well, I don't want that. And so I don't know the path to get out of that and to have more options and to be happier and to not just be okay with basically living below poverty for the rest of my life, and to like do things. I didn't know I didn't know who to turn to, because there was no mentors, is what I'm trying to say. Like, it wasn't normal where I grew up to like want to break out. And I don't even know why I wanted to break out, which is not for me. And so I knew that from when I was a little kid preparing for college. But like after college, it was like, well, I only had aspirations to get to college. Now that I have this college degree that, like, you know, I don't have that much debt, but like for me, it's kind of a lot. And I don't really have that many great job prospects, and the war in Iraq was starting. It was just craziness, and it was just really hard, because for the first time in like ever, I was met with some real challenges of being an adult that wasn't protected behind being a student anymore. And the person that I was with wasn't following the same path, because they were delaying that process as well. He was actually a poker player, and he didn't have to enter the job market, so he didn't understand how hard it was to compete against the people who are also newly graduated, who also had the same degree as me, you know what I mean, in the same very small pool. It's not like a lot of the people that I knew of would go back to their big cities and they would take their degrees, and, you know, it would be a little bit easier because of their family connections, their own connections, their life connections that a bigger city had already like given them an advantage over my little life. And not that I was comparing, but I just saw that it was difficult for me, and I didn't know how to navigate this, because I didn't know how to, like, there was no one to help me. And so I had to do this kind of on my own. And I think from there, it was like, even within my own relationship, I felt very alone. And I think that is where the whole thing started, as far as really following the path of like relying on yourself for a lot of things that I can, and to like learn how to build that path of self-reliance instead of because there was just ipso facto, there was no one to rely on besides me. And so it's like, well, I've always got me, so there you go. So had my parents been, you know, PhD graduates or whatever, and they had all this life experience with how to you know, do with life after college, the things that you're supposed to do in college in order to get a better position within, you know, whatever company that you want to try to get. I didn't even know who to apply for or what to even do with my degree. It was very like that. It was very like, I had this piece of paper, but like, now what? And it was very abrupt because after graduation, it's very like, it's very real. And so anyways, that was the beginning of like trying to figure this out and commit to the path of like figuring this out, but also like a big floundering period. So I had a floundering period, and that was before I really had skills of being self-reliant, because I didn't know what to do. And so I was clinging on to the rafters of hope. Like I was clinging on to the rafters of like, well, my relationship should see that I'm floundering. Shouldn't they help me? Like, shouldn't they give me advice of what to do? Or, you know what I mean? I was placing the responsibility, I was dividing it up amongst the people that knew me. Like, my family knew that I went to college, but I don't really have a great, you know, job right now. Shouldn't they kind of check in and kind of, you know, ask me how I'm doing, or like if they can help with my problems? Literally no one really cared. I mean, I'm sure that they cared, but like not to the point where like they recognized that there was a problem, probably because they didn't even know that there was something wrong. And so I was a long time graduated, and I didn't have a very good job. It wasn't like I just, you know, had that all perfectly lined up. And so I don't think my relationship even really cared, because they were like, he was trying to make money the way that he knew how to make money, and that was already stressful. Like I was clinging to rafters that didn't really exist, and the door was already closed there anyways for various reasons. And it's not even a malicious reason, it's just because they didn't have extra to give, basically, or they didn't realize that that was happening to me, basically. Or, you know, like for my family's kind of sake, they didn't have any experience with this. What could they help me with, right? Their solution was always just work really hard and you'll get to where you need to go. And if it's not where you need to go, you should just be happy with what you got. And so like none of those were solutions for me. And so I just, you know, I floundered really hard. And it was super difficult for me, and I got into a lot of debt. I had zero money, literally zero money. I would have to borrow money. I would have to borrow money just to like buy interview clothes so that I could potentially get a better job. And I remember one really sad day. I had borrowed money from my boyfriend at the time, and this was like his last straw of like the money that he was gonna give me, because like I had asked him to pay my rent, and I'd, you know, done all these things that indicated like, you know, I didn't know how to fix my life, but I need you to still help me because you're the one with me. So like a lot of responsibility was falling on him, but he was already trying to do his own thing. So he'd given me some money to go buy some pants downtown at like Old Navy or something, some like black interview pants, and I didn't have a car then because I couldn't afford a car, and I had to like walk downtown, which was, you know, fine, but it was kind of far. And on my way to my interview, I think I had pockets, and he'd given me cash. Poker players always have cash. So he'd given me cash, and like not a lot, but like, you know, maybe $160 and like 20s or something. So there's enough like kind of cash to like make it a wad, but it's not really. So anyways, I don't know why I didn't take better care of this cash, but it was in my pocket, and it was a windy day, and all of a sudden I realized that I didn't have money in my pockets, and I'm on my way to my interview. And it was like one of the last interviews that I was like on my way to, that I'd like lined up in a while. And I'd been on like a bunch of really like sad interviews where like I know I didn't do well, and I knew I wasn't gonna get the job, but I needed to get the job. It was like that kind of time in my life where like everything was going wrong. I felt very alone, and I felt like a lot of pressure to like really make this work, because I needed things to turn around, but they just were not. So anyways, I remember feeling my pants and being like, I don't have the money, where's the money? And I remember like walking and looking behind me, and there's a little kid like a little bit of ways away, and he's picking up all of my money, and he's really happy that he's finding all this money on the ground, and his like mom is like with him or something. And this is like a 5 or 7 year old kid, so like they understand what money is. And I started running, and I was like, oh my god, I need to go get that money from this kid. How am I going to say that this is my money? But like I'm also almost late for this interview, and I had to decide whether or not to just go to this interview or to let the little kid keep my money that I'd borrowed that I was probably not going to get any more for a while. And I was borrowing not to eat food. Like I literally had like almost no food because it was like that kind of thing. My boyfriend at the time he would live with me, but he was gone traveling because the different places that he played poker, he would literally like just go there and play for a long time so he could make the most money and make the most out of his trip. So I was basically living alone. And so like I didn't ask, but I asked for like the rent, and I asked for like very, 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 very basic things like getting new pants to like go and try to get a job. And so I didn't ask for like cushy things like, you know, extra good food or whatever. And so I was literally thinking like I was trying to buy the cheapest pants so I could still have enough money to like get some food after, so like the next time that he was really gone I could still kind of like have a little bit of options for that. And so that is the kind of stuff that I was like thinking about at that point in time of my life. And I just remember just being like, this is such like a horrible moment for me, because I wish I could go back and get that money, but I really just need to go to that interview. And I would just remember being like, this really sucks. This like absolutely sucks. And I bombed the interview. Like I didn't get that job. And I ended up getting a job like decorating cakes up the road at a grocery store. And that's how I broke into like the whole thing about, you know, learning creative stuff. It wasn't what I obviously went to school for. I wouldn't have even like, you know, I didn't need to go get that degree in order to do that. And so it was like, oh, I wasted all this money and time on this degree when I could have just gone right from, you know, high school in order to go decorate a cake. But like every step of life is just like a little path to like where you are going to go. And it's like, it doesn't feel like it's the right thing that it's gonna help you long term and in the moment, but like I still actually to this day, this was like over 15 years ago I think, I still actually to this day really enjoy the idea of decorating cakes and like having that kind of skill. I have baking tips and stuff, like decorating tips for like icing bags, and like I have a KitchenAid to like make really nice icing so I can make really nice things for myself. And like I look at Pinterest and I look at Instagram and like all those little cupcakes that they make that looks like perfect flowers, and I'm like, I know how to do that. Like that's so cute. I know how to do those things. And I'm like, oh, that was such a nice fun time in my life. And it actually gave me confidence back, because I had like zero confidence in myself because I just kept getting rejected after rejection after rejection during this crucial period where I needed to be like on, like right after you graduate from college and you need to start paying back your stuff, but you're not paying it back, you're actually getting into more debt and you literally have no money. So it gave me a little bit of stuff back. I would walk up to the bakery, and I didn't even start at the bakery with being able to decorate. Like I worked my way up to decorating. Like I was the closer. I was hired as the closer at first. And so I do all the tasks that need to be done in order to make the morning shift a lot nicer. And for a bakery that makes sense. Like you make all your sales in the morning when stuff is fresh and blah, blah, blah. So anyways, I would clean dishes and I would sweep the floors and I would chat with my coworkers. And so it gave me like a sense of like other people that were my peers. They had the same job as me, but they're also working at the same place as me. But they were also students, and sometimes the students had graduated as well. And so I didn't feel like such a failure. Like super failure to launch at that point. And so I was like, oh, I'm just literally trying my best and I'm just like getting some money. It's like basically minimum wage, but I was just getting some money and I was getting some skills, and like I no longer had to like go like a long time without like eating an amount of good food or whatever. I had just enough money that I could, you know, eventually pay my own rent, and everything started to like get a little bit better once I got like this tiny bit of hope basically. And it wasn't because I found like such a well-paying job, and it wasn't because like I found what I wanted. I just found it the next step above the horrible that I was, you know, experiencing before. And I feel like that's really all you need to do sometimes. You don't need to solve a problem totally. You just need to do a little bit better than where you were at in order to gain a little momentum. So that was happening with my life, and I worked at the bakery for I think 2 or 3 years, which you know, the economy changed a little bit within that time period, but like it was all still kind of like the same. And what was different was that I had moved up from the closer to being like a specific only cake decorator, because at nighttime when I would close in a hurry. I would do it fast. And then there was fun things for me to do after I got all of my tasks done that they expected me to do. And I would like quietly just work on some cakes. They had frozen cakes, and I would put them on the little cake stand, and I would use my creativity to make little dragons out of things, or I would practice decorating with the different colors and tips or whatever. And that was how I would pass the time at night, and I would not like really ask people to kind of teach me. I just kind of like did it. And so it was fun for me. It was a really fun thing for me, because it was like me deciding that this was going to be my fun little thing. And I could have probably gotten into a lot of trouble, because like I put a ton of frosting on some of the cakes, and like the labels on the cake, like on the sides, like the nutrition label has like a certain amount of frosting, and if you put like a ton of it on like I did with my like cake decoration, like I would make like sunken ships and stuff, and like it involved like a whole bunch of like extra frosting. And so like the label, like the nutrition label, did not match the actual cake. And like in a corporate world, that's kind of important. Like I didn't learn that until like way later, but like I was just doing without asking, but I was just doing something that was like really fun for me. And eventually the people in the morning would see the stuff that I would do at nighttime, and like they were two different separate shifts, and like two different separate shifts that I would never like really interact with these people. But obviously I would interact with my boss, and my boss would be like, oh hey, like did you do this? And I was like, yes, expecting to be like reprimanded. But eventually they were just like, oh, do you want to come in at a different or earlier so that you can work on cakes? And I was like, yeah, like that'd be great. Who would have thought that I would, you know, be a cake decorator? But like I would be the closer, and then I would be the cake decorator, and then eventually they just asked me to like come in almost toward the beginning of the early morning shift, like the mid-morning afternoon shift, just to do cakes. And I didn't have to do like the extra stuff at nighttime anymore. But so I think that was the thing that kind of helped me along. It was like having someone see my worth, and having someone like recognize that I had some talent in something, but like for me quietly to decide that I wanted to do that anyways. So I'm very strange that way. If you tell me what to do, I don't like it, but if you allow me to discover it by myself, I will enjoy it. And I've been that way for like a really long time, and so like it all comes full circle as far as like how I am right now in my current self-employed position, doing my own job in my own apartment that, you know, I moved to from across the country by myself. All these little things that I'm telling you are all little building blocks for how I got there. And I didn't know at the very beginning of this video that I was going to explain the very beginning stages of my career to you and how they all tie into now, but I think that's what I'm doing. And this video was long enough that my battery is now like flashing at me like it's gonna die, and so I'm trying to wrap it up, because I'm like, well, this is a good segue into maybe the next phase of my life, what happened after I, was a cake decorator? How did I move up from there, and how did I eventually like move when I was like 35 into the desert, and how did I move back to the East Coast that I am right now when I'm almost 38, or I am 38, I'm almost 40. So how does that all tie together? And so I think I'm gonna make a little series of like, my life choices and my career and how everything was impacted by each thing, and like the lessons I learned. So that's something I never shared on my old channel. I don't know why, but that's I was expecting to kind of talk about a different topic, but like this is what just naturally came, and I think it was really enjoyable for me to talk about. So hopefully it was enjoyable for you to listen to, and just know that probably the next video is going to be the next phase, like I said, and that is me getting a more higher paying job. That was us moving. My relationship and I, we moved to an apartment by ourselves in a quieter area of New England, and because previously we lived with like 4 or 5 people, and it was like a big mess toward the end. It's always a big mess every time I leave an apartment, but it was always a big mess toward the end. And so it was like a really interesting thing to go from like, having no money, no food, no boyfriend around, to like we live together and I have kind of a more professional life, and he still has this poker life, and like what that meant for our relationship, and what that meant for us as a unit, and like what that meant for me, and probably what that meant for him, and like all these things. So like we transitioned just within a couple of years after this whole thing that I just explained to you. But like this is the very basic beginning of how I accumulated all these little skills that allow me to have the confidence to just do things by myself and to not be scared, because everything else was just so scary that I had to deal with in my old lives, because it was just real hard. So anyways, I hope that you enjoyed that. I hope that you got something from it, and next week I will explain to you what happens next.